This is Terry Shower, and I'm here to help you reach financial freedom, invest anywhere in North America, and get your life back with real estate investing. Our show today is about a very important topic, and that is navigating financial risks to you and your family. Spoiler alert, I'm not selling insurance, but I am selling a particular way of structuring your income systems so that you can avoid some of the financial risks that might be out there. So let's get right into the topic of today's show. And that is about protecting your income, protecting your family's livelihood, and escaping some of the financial insecurity that might be associated with the way that we earn money. And I want to start the show today just with a story that I heard recently about a high income professional who suffered an injury near the beginning of his career. He was a dentist and he had a hand injury. And that led him down the rabbit hole of thinking about what could happen to him and his family. He was the principal income earner in that family. And it led him to think about exactly how risky it is when your family's livelihood is tied to one source of income. And, that brings us into like a whole wider discussion of within the context of the real estate investing show, talking about how is it that wealthy people, how is it that people who are, financially free or financially independent, how have they set themselves up to create that situation for themselves and their family? And one of this has to do with income streams. So if you have a 9 to 5 job, a W-2 job, or if you're a high income earning professional. So who might that be? That might be like doctors, dentists, accountants, lawyers, perhaps even C-level positions within companies. If you fall into one of those categories and basically you have tied yourself to one source of income, that can be extremely vulnerable if ever anything were to happen, in terms of your ability to work. And so part of the way to mitigate that risk is by having multiple income streams coming in. And you'll notice that when you hear about the way wealthy people talk about things, some of the ways that they talk is about the different income streams that they have that are providing, multiple ways in which they and their family can make money. And you'll also notice that people who are well off don't necessarily express themselves in terms of, oh, I'm a lawyer, I'm a mechanic, I'm a doctor. They will talk about some of the businesses that they own or the investments that they own or the different multiple income generating streams, kind of like conducting an orchestra. That ends up being the way in which wealthy people talk about their, financial situation or about their career. It's less in terms of I am my career or I am my job, and more in terms of what is it that I'm doing to generate those multiple income streams. And so, before we have our expert guest on who's going to tell us, a little bit more about this today, I want you to just take a few minutes to think through in your own mind, what does your financial setup look like? Is your family's livelihood, is your personal livelihood tied to one source of income? And what might that look like if something were to happen to your capacity to generate that income in terms of, an accident or work or anything else? What might that look like? And what might you do to create some more sources of income that will build out that financial security? And maybe some of those are real estate. Maybe those are, investments that you can be doing actively or in the real estate field. Maybe they're not. But the degree to which you're able to have many different legs on which you and your family stand financially is going to help you have additional security and escape some of those constraints, some of those financial instability constraints that you might be facing. So without further ado, let's jump in and hear from our expert guest today, dentist Jeff Anselon. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for being with me today. And you're called the debt-free doctor. We, had a little off-camera chat about, some dentists or some doctors that are, I've joint venture partnered with in the past. Tell me, how did you become the debt-free doctor? Like, what does that even mean?
Well, when I got out of dental school back in 2000, so I'm actually showing my age, there was really just a handful of quote financial gurus in the US. I'm not really sure if Dave Ramsey was really big in Canada or is now in Canada. I'm not really sure, but have some of your listeners heard of him?
I'm sure they have. We have Kiyosaki obviously was up here and
Mhm.
then, he had his own real estate education organization, I guess you could call that. So that's like one of the things that was pretty big up here, but there are gurus
Mhm.
here as well.
Okay. Well, Dave Ramsey, he's known to be anti debt. He, has something called the debt snowball. So back then, when I got out of dental school, that was really the only thing that I really knew about was to do the debt snowball, pay off your smallest debts, smallest to largest, throw everything at the small debt. Once it's paid off, move on to the next one, and then so on and so forth. So by the time you get to the end, you're putting a lot of money away. Well, early on, I was supposed to join a group practice when I got out of my training. The deal fell through. I had 300 grand student loan debt. We'd already bought a house. My wife and I, we had a 2-month old. And the worst part is in dental school, medical school, all these professional schools, they don't teach you how to run a business or practice. So as you can imagine, it was very trying times back then. Luckily, I'm from a small town. Somebody heard about my situation. They had been through sort of the same scenario. He reached out. He said, "Hey, I'm renovating this big building, this old general surgery building. Do you want to come in? You can rent space from me. You can share my equipment. You can share my employees, so you don't have to take out any more loans. Plus, I'll show you like how to run a business or practice." I was like, "Yeah, that's great." I did that for the first 2 years, and so during that time, I was using the Dave Ramsey method. Bought my own building, started my own practice. 7 or 8 years later, we had paid off all the debt, student loan debt, including that house. And I was just thinking, okay, let's live happily ever after. That's the American way. You work until you're 70, you invest in a 401k, like a retirement account. Do they have something like that in Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, that would be an RRSP. And so that's like part of, I guess our lore of like when you're doing things right as an employee, like you're investing in your RRSPs, and that's supposed to be what ends up taking you through retirement.
What does that stand for? RSP.
Registered Retirement Savings Plan.
Okay. So I guess the 401k or IRA or whatever is similar to that.
Yeah.
And it took me to the point about 10 years into practice. We were snow skiing in Colorado with the family. I fell, I hurt my wrist. And as you can imagine, it's kind of hard to practice dentistry, without like a hand. But that never registered to me. I was just thinking, you kind of like people that get sick or cancer or whatever, you don't ever think about that. You think, "Hey, I'm going to work till I'm 70 and that's it." That was my wake up call to if I can't use my hands and I can't provide for my family and kids. So that really made me start to look at all the different things that I've been taught about money and finances and how to operate. And the deeper that I went down the rabbit hole, the more that I realized why there were the 99 percenters and then why there were the 1 percenters. The majority of the people do the same thing and they're broke and they're in debt and that's how they are. And once I started looking at really, really big time wealthy people, I'm talking about people that are worth, 8, 9, 10 figure net worths, that they do things totally different than we were taught. For instance, 90+% of them had real estate in their portfolio. At that time, I had zero. They had multiple income streams coming in, average of 7. At that time, I had 1, and it was all on me, the highest taxed income, active income. Again, I was just never exposed to any of that. And another thing is when you ask wealthy people, what do they do for a living? They don't quote do anything. They don't say, "I am a doctor, I am a lawyer." They say, "I own." I own real estate, I own businesses. And it was just I started like, looking, I just got finished reading this book, The Gap and the Gain. This is by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. And he talks a lot about where everybody's living in the gap and everybody's unhappy because we're always looking ahead. We're always looking forward instead of looking behind where we've come from. So we're always focused on the goal and we should look backwards, the process that we've come through. That's what makes the person. That's what makes you happy. But I'd never really looked back until I had this injury. And I could have started blaming people and all this and that, but I was like, you know what, it's my fault. It's time to make a change right now. And I did. So that really narrowed my focus down. Okay, wealthy people, they invest in real estate and they have multiple streams of income. Okay, well, I'm going to invest in real estate for multiple streams of income. So I made that my mission. And I thought you had to go out and buy a house or apartment or duplex or something and rent it out. And the more that I learned, the more that I got around other people and went to conferences. Yeah, you could do that, but there were so many other things that you could do to invest in real estate, yet stay focused on your biggest wealth building tool, and that is your profession. Doctors, dentists, attorneys, we spend a lot of time, energy, and money to get to where we are. And when you start taking your attention away from that, what happens? Your practice or business starts to suffer. Now, I'm not saying you can't invest and manage property yourself. I'm just talking about if you're just getting started, at least for me, that was the best thing. I got into started passively investing in real estate syndications, would have never known about this world unless I got hurt. And then after a while, I became a little more confident to start going out on my own, partnering with people. And we own RV parks, we own mobile home parks, different things. But again, in our church the other day, the pastor says we don't change without pain. Whether you're a believer or not, it doesn't really matter. That's what it is. I mean, everybody likes to be comfortable and nobody likes change. That's just human nature. I mean, think about it. The real big, obese, overweight people that know they need to lose 300 pounds, what happens? Do they ever change? No. When do they change? When they get the chest pain, when they have a heart attack. And it took me from hurting my wrist, and hopefully people listening to this, you realize if you have one stream of income, that's a very risky way to live. And it's so nice just opening up your bank app and just seeing you're constantly getting, I'm not talking about a ton of money, but just a little bit here, a little bit there, something to pay the cable bill, something to pay the cell phone bill. I've got a trailer park in Louisiana that pays my mortgage. They didn't freaking teach me that in dental school. So I really recommend that you assess your situation. It doesn't matter what you do for a living, and then look at that and then figure out ways, because the most important thing is your time. Money is nothing more than a tool. I grew up in a household with a scarcity limited mindset. And I thought that money was, you get money to spend it. You get money to pay bills. And the wealthy people realize money's just a tool to free them up to let them do what they want. Not necessarily go buy a Lamborghini or something, but it's just like, I'm only practicing 3 days a week now. I wouldn't have been able to do that before had I not gotten into this.
So, I mean, there's just was like so much stuff there. I want to, just ask you a couple of questions about some of the stuff that you kind of glossed over. So, I mean, you referred to this incident where you hurt your hand. And I think, for all of our listeners who have perhaps a similar financial structure or a similar family structure, like if you're the main income earner and that income is tied to some sort of a job that you have to be doing on a regular basis and something interferes with your ability to do that job. I mean, that's an incredibly risky way to set yourself up and to set your family up. And, it really struck me also when you said that, wealthy people don't talk about, oh, well, I am this. They talk about, I own this, or perhaps these are like some of the activities that I do. I want to know, how did you get access to that information? Like when you started, so, you got hurt, then is there some kind of insurance that like covers you if you can't work? And then what did you do to get access to that information? Were you reading? Did you think about like, let me change my peer group and start meeting some of those wealthy people? Like, how did that happen for you?
In the US, we have, well, you can take out a disability insurance policy. Most of the time that doesn't cover, that may cover the bare necessities. And there's so many stipulations, and we won't start for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months after you get hurt. And I wanted something that was just, it was coming in regardless whether I was treating patients or not. And then to answer your question about the information, it's all free online.
Sure.
YouTube, podcasts like this. And one of the things that people I think make the mistake is they'll listen to and they'll follow like almost everything somebody says. And I don't recommend that. I recommend you get bits and pieces from people. And when people reference a book or they reference a podcast or something, well, if this really successful people read this book, well, I'm gonna go read that book. Or if they recommend that, so you'll notice that there's really just kind of a small circle of really influencers that really know what they're talking about, and they're all recommending each other, and they're all recommending the same resources, books, podcasts, YouTube channels. And if you just constantly immerse yourself in that, that's great, but nothing's going to happen. Nothing changes until you change, until you change and take action. And one of the best quotes that I've ever heard, and I can attest to this because I have calls with people all the time. I'll sit here and I'll have an hour call with somebody, helping them out with their planning, investments, strategies, this and that. 99% of the time, they won't do anything. But if I charge somebody $2,500 for an hour of my call, and I will tell them the exact same information that I just told the freebie. They're coming to the call with a yellow pad, a pen, and Jeff, can we record this podcast? They're ready. People don't pay attention because they don't pay. Once you pay attention, and I've noticed that, and me too. I mean, I've done the same thing. You know, I'm guilty as charged. That's just human nature. And I think there's so much free information online. It's so overwhelming. That's why people don't do anything.
Yeah.
Back in the
No, I
days, back in the days before the internet and all that, how'd you get your information? We had to go to the library. We had to like look it up. We had to do all that. It was hard. And once we looked it up, we wrote it and we took action. With here, it's just like you're getting dings and texts and notification. It's just like, where do you start? It's so overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think a little bit back you said something about, change, and that's actually something that like I say a lot. I say like nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, "Oh, today's the day that I'm going to change." Like change happens as a result of I call it like crashing your operating system, right? Like we all have this way, this habitual way in which we go about doing things, and it's actually very rare that people or myself included, us as human beings, right? Like we're not wired to seek new ways of doing things, and however we're imprisoned, like it's usually as a result of something catastrophic happening or something that's disruptive enough happening that we have to like look at our models, look at our ways of functioning, and then reevaluate some of that. And I mean that goes health wise as much as financially, as much as a bunch of other stuff. So I think you're right, absolutely right when you said that.
Yeah, for sure. That's how we're wired. We're wired to back in the survival days, the caveman days, where you're wired to conserve your energy and you don't want any change until you have something in your environment to make you get up and, change your environment, to change your situation. And that's just, has trickled down to how it is today. Funny story, this was maybe last year, for the first 15, 16 years of my practice, I've always paid my employees with a check. And we switched accountants, and part of their payroll is direct deposit. I announced it to my staff. You would have thought I was telling them that the building was on freaking fire. I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, it just you were changing this. Why do we have to change this? And it's just like it's mind-boggling. The first time they got their direct deposit, guess what? Oh, this is the best thing ever. And I didn't even have to go to the bank and get in line. And I was like, that's human nature. It's funny, but it's true. It's just people do not like change.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I also want to ask you, so, debt-free doctor, and one of the things you mentioned a little bit earlier in the interview is you were saying that, very often when doctors and dentists start like doing something that's outside of building their practice suffers. So, would you have any advice or would you be able to like, tell those other doctors and dentists who are listening to the show exactly what they need to do in order to get those multiple income streams coming in and not have their principal business suffer?
I have to answer this based on my experience, and it's hard for me to answer that because most people don't have a strong enough why to make them change. I did with getting hurt, and if somebody's listening to this and they're a dentist or a doctor and maybe they work at the computer all the time and they need their hands, they're thinking, oh, I'm never going to get hurt. I don't need to listen to that. And I was like that too until I got hurt. So it's difficult unless you write down like you have a why, like literally you look at all the time every day because your why is gonna, the Simon Sinek book start with why. Your why is everything. It's gonna push you. It's gonna motivate you. It's kind of like if somebody's getting married, a woman's getting married in 3 months and she got to lose, 10 pounds to fit into her wedding dress, or whatever. That's her why. She's like, okay, I got 3 months, 90 days, the clock's ticking. Versus we're like, oh, okay, well, I'm 30 years old and I've got plenty of time not to worry about it. So the first thing I would recommend is you figure out, most people don't know what they want. Figure out what you want. What are you trying to accomplish? And don't go out 30 years or 40 years. Let's just say the next 3 years. Focus on the next three years. What do you want to accomplish? It could be, I would like to acquire one extra income stream besides my main job. Or it could be, I want $10,000 a year in passive income coming in 3 years, whatever it is. And then from there, just focus on, the other book that I have over here by the same people that wrote The Gap in the Game is Who Not How. Most Most people are asking how. It took me 2 years to start a YouTube channel because I kept asking what everybody asks, how questions. How do I start a YouTube channel? How do I come up with the content? How do I edit it? How do I make those thumbnails? How do I upload? It was like all this how stuff. And that kept me for 2 years from taking action instead of who. Who can help me do all of that? You find a who that do it for you. Again, people don't understand how important their time is. So there's 2 years I wasted and of not doing it. So find a who that can do a lot of this stuff for you. That may take networking. That may if you're first 15 years, all went to dental meetings. It's a bunch of dentists that go there because they have to be there to get their continuing education hours. They don't want to be there for the most part. They're like, okay, well, where's the little code I write down so I can get out of there? So the first 15 years, think about that. I'm around people that don't want to. I was not learning anything outside of dentistry from being there. You have to change your network. You have to be around people that, if it's real estate, be around other real estate investors or people investing in cash flowing assets or businesses or whatever. So if you have to change your environment, you have to get around other people. That would probably be my recommendation. And once you're around other people, guess what? Not only are you going to learn from them, you're going to start networking with them, partnering with them. That's how I got my business partner and we're buying mobile home parks with. But if I'd have kept going to dental meetings, I'd have never done that.
Mhm.
Again, you got to get out of your comfort zone and change. If not, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like, when I asked you a little bit earlier in the interview about the peer group question, like that's 100%. I would almost say like the first thing when people want to get started, like that's the first thing you need to evaluate is who are you hanging around with? And that doesn't, I like to make a distinction also between network and peer group. So there might be like your professional network. So like if you're in real estate, like, your realtors, your bankers, people who bring you off market deals, like there's that professional network, but then there are the peers, and those are the people who you don't pay. They're just the people that you hang around with and, have casual conversations with. And the power of those people that you surround yourself with, it's just insane. Once you get around different people, the kind of different results that start showing up, just because maybe what they take for granted is gonna just open possibilities for you.
Yeah, I was listening to a YouTube video yesterday. This guy, he went to some mastermind. He paid 35 grand to be there. And he named some guy that was there. I never heard of him. And he said the guy was only there for like, he kind of started talking to him. They exchanged numbers and then the person started speaking. Well, the guy got up. They were talking about something or whatever, going back and forth. And he raised his hand. He asked a question and he said something. And the guy left. It was like a 2-day mastermind. The guy never came back. And so this guy texts the guy that left. He's like, dude, what happened to you? Why'd you leave? He's like, well, I got what I needed. He's like, you're only there for an hour. He's like, no, I got what you needed. And then like 3 months later, he contacted him. He had some questions. He heard an idea at this meeting. And what he was doing, he was looking for his next opportunity to start an online business. He did it. Then he asked him more questions. Like a few years later, he noticed this guy from that meeting, came up with the idea, developed a company, and then sold it for 100 million after 1 hour of being there. Why did he do that? Well, guess what? He was in a room. He changed his surroundings. He changed his group. And you've got to get out of your group to get stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he's told, and he paid this. He told him something else one time where he went and paid $50,000 for a 2-day course. And growing up, his dad heard about this. Like, you paid $50,000 to go to this course? Are you nuts? Well, you crazy? Well, he took what he learned there and he sold, a bunch of mastermind, or, he was selling stuff online. He sold over $1 million worth of products and services from the 50 grand. Again, would you pay 50 grand to make $1 million bucks? I'm sure most people would, but you've got to get away from the people that are going to bring you down. And you can't, yeah, your parents raise you the best they can, but you got to get to the point where you're like, you separate yourself from the past. You are who you are now moving forward. You're not your past. You're your present self. And what you want best for you right now, it's coming from you and the people you surround yourself with. Kind of like you put the crabs in the bucket and they're all trying to get out, and they got the one at the top. What do? They try to drag it down. They don't want to get it out. And if that's what your peer group is trying to do for you, time to change peer groups.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, Jeff, thanks so much for sharing all this wisdom with the audience. We're coming up on just the time that we have for this interview. Did I miss anything? Like, is there something else you desperately want to share with the audience before we let them go?
I would say two concepts, and probably most of your listeners know this. If you want to build tremendous wealth, become an active real estate investor. Be involved, be a property owner or a partnership where you're managing, you're materially participating, or whatever. And I don't know how it is in Canada, but in the U.S., get to the point where you can file for real estate professional tax status. And that basically means you can take all the depreciation from your rental property to offset your active income. And once you do that, that's the game changer. If you, I don't know if there's anything like that in Canada, but for the people in the US, because most of us just, the more we make in the US, the more taxes we pay. And it gets to the point where it doesn't make sense anymore. Versus you can make as much as you want and pay little to no taxes because you understand the tax game. So that's what I would recommend that we didn't really talk about much.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's definitely some subtleties in how our government's tax. And I think if you think that you Americans are taxed a lot, I would recommend
Yeah.
not coming north of the
Yeah.
border because
Yeah.
we're leaving, the government's taking of just about half of everything that we earn here. But at the same time, we're allowed to take depreciation right from the start. So if you own income properties, you don't have to qualify for anything specific in order to take depreciation to offset your income. Of course, they do claw it back when it's capital gains time, and we don't have any way of offsetting the capital gains. Like there's no magical wand like you guys have in the US with the 1031 exchange. Like we don't have that up here. So when you
Mhm.
sell, you pay capital gains and that's all there is to it. But, definitely one of the less talked about ways that real estate can actually make you money without really making you money is by saving on your tax liabilities. And so definitely for people who, are in that, for us, 50% tax bracket, to look at owning real estate as a way of either generating expenses or being able to take depreciation against some of your active income. That's a great advice in terms of how people can get some of those additional income benefits. So Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time to share with the audience today. Hopefully there are some doctors and some dentists who are listening. If you know of some doctors, if you know of some doctors and dentists who happen to be listening to this show or who you think might want to listen to the show, please go ahead and share it with them, because I think that that's a community of people who would do well to hear a little bit more about some of this. And thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. If they want to find out a little bit more about what we're doing, check out debtfreedoctor.com. If they don't like to read, which I know a lot of people don't, I have a YouTube channel. You can actually take a look at that YouTube channel. It's on the website as well.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.